Howdy everybody, welcome to another episode of Yammy Noob. We are doing an old school ride-in review today of this 2024 Ducati Monster SP. Now, the new Ducati Monster, I say new in quotations because it's been around for a little bit, had a lot of people up in arms because they kind of made it look like, I mean, let's be real, it kind of looks like a Yamaha MT product, right? Or some Japanese bike, or like a Chinese bike. I think Ducati has polished the Monster to the point that a lot of the core old school Monster enthusiasts and Ducati enthusiasts, myself included, as the owner of a 2-valve air-cooled Desmo engine inside of my Ducati Scrambler Desert sled, they made us all a little, kind of perturbed, right? But let's do a nice ride and review on this motorcycle today, give it a fair chance, and see where the Monster SP fits in the big, broad world of the middleweight naked motorcycle, because this thing is kind of playing in quite a few different camps. So, big shout out to Eurocycle for the support on today's video. The only reason I have this beautiful Ducati Monster SP is because of their support. They send me over some cool loaner bikes, I ride them out, check them out, and then you guys head over to the website and check out their amazing used bike inventory and brand new bike inventory as well. If you're in the market for an Aprilia, Ducati, a BMW, a Royal Enfield, they've got you covered over there. Check out their inventory. They ship all over the nation. I've bought probably at least 8 or 9 different bikes from them, and the process is always really awesome. The bike shows up in a nice big professional trailer, and you get it delivered right to your door, which is pretty cool. So don't let their distance deter you. Head over to the website and check it out today. So let's swing a leg and let's talk a little bit about the Monster SP. All right, flicking the key to the Monster here, swinging a leg. Now, people talk a lot of crap about this particular model because of the new monocoque style frame that you'd see in the Panigales and the Streetfighter products, and because it doesn't have the trellis frame anymore, but it made it so light. This bike feels about 400-ish pounds, and with a seat height of about 33 inches, it's tall, it's narrow, it's thin, it's light. It feels very sporty. I'm about 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam, and standing on this motorcycle, I can just about flat-foot it. So if you are a little bit shorter, it may be a bit of a problem. Let's go ahead and fire it up, shall we? That L-twin rumbling to life, this 937cc Testastretta motor that is found in a variety of Ducati products. We'll talk about how that's a little bit unique for the category. Let's take a listen. Now, I heard on another review that this motorcycle cannot do a big rev bomb. Let's see. Yeah, look at that. It won't let you rev bomb it. I'm sure that's for safety, but I don't like the nannying there. Let's go ahead and take off this machine, and let's have some fun. So the route we're doing today is a slightly different route. I decided the Monster deserved a little bit more time in the saddle so we can talk about it in a complete sort of way. We're not just going to take off and immediately just start ripping it on some twisties. I think the Monster has become a very strange product in Ducati's lineup. This bike, I believe in SP configuration, costs north of $15,000. I think it's almost $16,000, so out the door, man, that's almost $18,000, maybe $19,000 if you're unlucky, depending on prep, delivery taxes, dock fees, all that other crap that dealerships like to throw at you. And so that makes it play in some pretty rarefied air, right? You're talking MT10s, you're talking any of the new middleweight naked motorcycles, Street Triple RS, MT09, Duke 990, all of those bikes are less money than this thing. And it completely makes sense. Ducati does not position themselves as a value-driven brand. You buy a Ducati because you want the brand name. You want that little badge right here that looks kind of cool, like the GP24 here with the black on red. And I think buying a Monster in 2024, most people would just see that you have a Ducati, and if that's cool to you, and then it works. You're like, okay, cool, I have a Monster. I like it. I like the Ducati name badge, and other people give me respect for it. However, I think that a lot of motorcyclists, guy loading me of a cop up there, that's nice of him. A lot of motorcyclists will know that the Monster is a somewhat entry-level Ducati product. But I think Ducati's done themselves a disservice in not bifurcating the Monster anymore. You can only buy the Monster with this 937cc Testastretta engine. And it makes about 110 horsepower, if memory serves me correctly, and some 70-something foot-pounds of torque, something like that. And because you don't have a little monster and a big monster anymore, you've kind of lost the ability to have several customers get into the monster lineup. You only can get a monster in a 937cc or in this SP, which gets you Olin suspension, a steering damper, I think better brakes. I don't remember exactly all the stuff. You get the cowl, you get the Termignonis, which are still street spec, so these do have a nice burble on the D-cell. Let's listen to the bike a little bit. And it does make a nice sound, doesn't it? Every time I ride a twin, like a parallel twin, I'm reminded that they are trying to emulate a V-twin, and then you ride a V-twin and you're like, oh man, it's so good. And although that there is no more delineation in the monster lineup, there's no big monster, little monster, you know, this V-twin is pretty unique in this category. You know, the triples, the MT-09 and the Street Triple, they're 3-cylinders. The Duke 990 is a parallel twin. The Z900 is a 4-cylinder, right? There is no hopped-up liquid-cooled V-twin in this category unless you look at a KTM Duke 1390, the Super Duke. And that doesn't really compete with this. It's much bigger, much more expensive, and that causes the monster to be in this weird mismatch between the worlds. On top of that, Ducati has cross-platformed this 937cc monster engine to a lot of different bikes, right? They've basically taken the approach that a lot of manufacturers are doing with their parallel twins, although Ducati is probably like, no way in hell we're making a parallel twin. So they took this 937, and it's in the Desert X, it's in the Super Sport, it's in the Multistrada V2. Despite that sharing the name with the Panigale V2 and Streetfighter V2, it does not have the 955cc Super Quattro engine that's found in the Panigale and the V2, because that motor makes about 155 horsepower. It's extremely spicy. This is the more pedestrian, more usable, more street-oriented engine that Ducati's able to take, cross-platform, package in a bunch of different ways. And you know, the design brief for that engine was probably like, look, we need something that's pretty modular, that can fit in a lot of stuff, it can work in a lot of stuff. And I've ridden the Desert X, I've ridden the Streetfighter V2, and now I've ridden this bike. I've ridden several of Ducati's products in that kind of 900-ish cc range. And the Super Quattro engine feels very different from this 937. Well, I've also ridden the Hypermotard 950. That bike's a riot. And so I think Ducati, you know, you go to their lineup and you see Monster, you see Streetfighter V2, you see Hypermotard 950, you're like, what the heck am I supposed to buy? It's not exactly clear. And the Monster is such a legendary name in Ducati's lineup. Truly the bike that saved Ducati, in my opinion. This is a motorcycle that back in the 90s, Ducati was really on some tough times because they're a motorcycle company that builds racing machines and then they sell bikes to be able to support that, right? Very different than someone like Honda that just makes out millions and millions of motorcycles and then can allocate some of that budget into racing. Ducati's the opposite, right? They sell bikes so that they can go race, not the other way around. And so back in the 90s, Ducati really launched this category of the naked street fighter motorcycle. The SV650 copied the Monster, but it was so iconic, man. The air-cooled, the trellis frame, it really was this awesome parts bin kind of motorcycle. And it basically saved Ducati. It allowed Ducati to continue making motorcycles and allowed them enough sales to build the really racy stuff that they want to build. And they kind of do that nowadays, but in the different end of the market. I remember seeing a while back some internal Ducati communication that basically suggested that they are no longer targeting the entry and mid-market. They are only targeting the ultra high-end premium stuff, because they figured out, because of some number crunching, that if they can sell about 100 limited edition Pecco Bagnaia, Panigale V4s, they'll make more than if they sell 1,000 entry-level motorcycle models, right? Your margins on the super high-end stuff is much higher. That's Harley's playbook, right? And you can see that with the amount of limited edition bikes, Lamborghini collaborations. Ducati is really positioning itself as like, no, we are like ultra luxury, ultra premium, ultra top end, and that's what we focus on. And we are the absolute bleeding edge of performance, as seen by the results in MotoGP, of course. They obviously mop up shop. So again, that leaves the Monster in a bit of a strange spot, because as a legacy product, it used to be the entry point. It used to be that, I mean, man, how many different Monsters has Ducati made? I mean, countless, right? Dozens. 600s, 797, the 821, which is truly one of my preferred Ducati Monsters. I really like the 821. I rode the 1200. That was awesome too. And so now that you have the Streetfighter V4 and the V2, those have kind of taken the place of what the Monster used to be in Ducati's lineup for like a super class-leading, performance-oriented naked bike. And now the Monster has to be this kind of middling middleweight naked bike. Hard to say. And I'm not really sure who the customer for this bike is for, you know? Is it for someone that really wants the experience of a Ducati, you know, without spending too much money, and they don't want a Scrambler, right? Because everybody knows a Scrambler is not a real Ducati. I get told that plenty, right? I get told plenty that a Scrambler is not a real Ducati, which I personally think it's more of a Ducati than this thing, in a way, because it has the frame and it has the air-cooled 2-valve Desmo engine, but maybe I'm just a purist. And I think it's a hard case to make for the Monster when you consider all the competition. But it is unique, you know? It has the liquid-cooled L-twin. I mean, that's a nice sound, right? It's a crisp, tactile sound. And I can really see how the learnings from MotoGP trickle down into the flagship products. I test drove a 2020 Panigale V4R on track last year, and it was just magical. It was magical what that bike could do. And that fueling and that response and that all of that stuff trickles down into this category as well. And I'm happy to report that, you know, this bike feels really, really good to ride. You know, side to side, just, it's very agile, very nimble, very fun to ride. And I remember when the original marketing materials for this bike came out, you had guys on kart tracks doing wheelies and skidding it around. The Monster was not really positioned as a bleeding edge performance naked bike as much as a fun, everyday, usable, you know, just good time motorcycle. And I can really appreciate that, honestly. I think we've gotten a little carried away with the insane high performance stuff nowadays. And I like that the Monster is a little more focused on fun, accessibility, and friendliness. Now, the one thing I really have to give Ducati credit for is somehow managing to do two things in the modern day. They managed to make motorcycles that sound beefy and burly while meeting noise restrictions. I don't know how they do it. I swear to God, stock Ducatis are always louder than any other motorcycle. And I don't know why. I don't know how they get away with it. I don't know why, but they just do. And then modern Ducatis also have incredibly linear fueling and no dead spots in the rev range. This is something we've seen with a lot of new motorcycles, is that, you know, because of noise restrictions, because of EPA restrictions, hydrocarbon restrictions, I mean, there's so much that manufacturers have to do now to make sure that their bikes meet all of these requirements. Euro 5, all that stuff, right? Euro 6 is coming right around the corner too. You know, but Ducati, somehow, you don't feel any dead spots in this engine. You don't feel like you have a noticeable dip in power anywhere. Unfortunately, products like the MT-09 are known for this. There is a bit of a dead spot in the middle. You know, even my the RS457 we have right now has a teensy bit of a dead spot. It's not as noticeable because it's a beginner bike, right? It doesn't make as much power in the first place. But when you have a higher powered motorcycle that has those dead spots, the BMW S1000RR, for example, also has the dead spot. I don't really notice it on the Monster, which is great. So I don't know if they just tuned it to just not be as noticeable, or if they managed to kind of eke out a quality linear fueling as opposed to the dead spots. One thing that's just awesome about the Monster is that because it's made from a company that basically only cares about racing, it's a very, very, very sporty product. much more so than the old monsters that had the big trellis frame. This thing is tall, it's narrow, it falls over super fast, it's super lightweight and flickable. I can't really begin to explore the limits of performance to this thing on street, but just rest assured that the feeling from the saddle is that this is a very capable motorcycle, especially with this Olin suspension package front and rear. It's a very nice, supple ride, and you could just dial this thing really nicely and have a really good time at a track day with this. And I think that's great, right? And again, Ducati's refined these products to the point where they're very nice to ride on road. I'm having a really nice time riding this bike. Now, granted, there's a couple of things I don't like so much about it. The first thing I don't like is that there's a very particular RPM range that you don't get kind of a bad vibration out of this bike. You know, twins are inherently balanced, right? The way the firing order works is such that one firing order cancels out the other and the whole thing is inherently balanced. But twins are known to produce vibrations no matter what. And this is no exception, right? If you lug this engine low down, you get kind of a nasty, chattery, chuckly kind of thing that it does. If you're at higher speeds with it on the highway, there's a very particular gear selection and RPM range you have to be in, otherwise you get really nasty vibration through the seat and through the foot pegs, and that's a bit frustrating. I don't really love motorcycles that you have to be so mindful of the rev range and gear selection in order to not have something just feel kind of bad, to be honest. That's not so great. Now, for me, as someone who does own the entry-level Ducati, the true scrambler, not even really a Ducati, you have to look really hard at it to even know it's a Ducati, right? I've actually had people where I'm like, oh yeah, I got this Ducati, like, that's a Ducati? I'm like, yeah, I know. But I don't care about that stuff, right? But, you know, I think that this product, it has Ducati right there on the tank. It'll feel very much like a proper Ducati. It's red, it's sporting, you know? For the vast majority of people, they're not going to know the difference, but I can't help but feel like, because us motorcyclists, we know what we leave on the table, right? If you go to the Ducati dealership and you pick up a Monster SP, perhaps you don't care at all, right? Perhaps you're just like, it doesn't really matter, I'm just going to rock this thing, doesn't matter to me. But I would always feel like I'm driving around in a 6-year-old base Porsche Macan. Yes, other people will know I have a Porsche. Wow, that's really cool, right? The brand name is so alluring. Oh, wow, Porsche, Ducati, oh, it's so cool. But you always know that there's countless models above what you have, and I think Ducati plays on that. I think they like the fact that you go to the dealership and there's a $100,000 Superleggera just sitting there being like, oh, if only your checkbook was big enough, then you could afford the real Ducati. You could get the good Ducati. Which is funny because this bike is great, you know, for its intended use case of a fun, sporty, everyday bike that you could possibly take on track every once in a while. It works really well. I don't know if it's worth, you know, $17,000, $18,000 out the door, but if money's not that big of a concern to you and you want something fun and splurge a little bit, I don't see why not. I mean, it has a lot more attitude than a lot of the other middleweight bikes, and it's very unique. It's got this twin-cylinder grunt. You know, if you've never ridden a big twin, oh man, you get so much immediate accessible power. Like you guys will see in the rev range here, this rather small TFT display, which is prior gen for Ducati. I don't know if you guys have seen the new Panigale V4 display is like this. It looks like an IMAX display. It's wider than it is tall, I think, which is nuts. Like much wider, like twice as wide as it is tall is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think this bike with the smaller display and stuff, you don't really quite get that super primo feeling. But, you know, you get a nice surge of torque out of this engine. Only redlines at about 10,000, so where you're at most of the time, you'll be really well served. But going back to what I was saying about the kind of confusion in Ducati's lineup, it's difficult to see what sort of customer buys a Streetfighter V2, a Monster, or a Hypermotard 950. It really feels like you're splitting hairs on which bike is designed for what person, you know? I would really prefer to see Ducati go the Aprilia route, that you have a very clear entry-level model, a middleweight model, and a top-end model. It'll also allow people to stay in the Ducati ecosystem, but I think from a branding perspective, Ducati does not want to be associated with anything entry-level, which, again, that's why they make their Scrambler lineup like its own thing. It's like they're Scramblers, and if you go to a dealership, a Ducati dealership, you'll see that the Scrambler lineup is actually in like a separate area, and it's branded separately, and it says Scrambler by Ducati. It's like a different type of thing. And so maybe that's the play there. They're like, okay, you go for a Ducati when you're ready for your big, expensive, cool bike, right? Perhaps they're trying to angle for the same guy that may go for a BMW GS or a Goldwing or a Harley, the kind of end state of motorcycle rider, right? The guy or gal who is thinking, you know, this is my 4th, 5th, 6th bike. I've been riding for 10 years. I've worked hard. I deserve the ultra, the premium, the best of the best. And truthfully, having ridden Ducati products on track, it is difficult to deny that these aren't the best of the best. As much as I don't like the price tag on a new Panigale V4, I know what that bike can do on track, and I'm like, you know what? It might be worth it. They are so ridiculously good. And the fact that you do get some of that trickle down into this product is great. Now, one thing I wanted to point out while we're here, you've made it this far into the video, you love hearing me ramble, I suppose. Ducati 698 Mono that they just released, which is an old school Panigale 1299 engine that they lopped one cylinder off of. And I'm really excited to see what Ducati does with that engine, honestly. I think that engine is way more versatile and interesting that they're letting on. I would love to see, one of my 2 bikes I would love to see them make is a desert sled variant, a Scrambler variant with the single cylinder that's just like a fun, peppy dual sport. I would love to see that. Would love to see a retro styled, just big, peppy dual sport a la, you know, Husqvarna 701 type of thing. Make us that bike, Ducati, please. That would be so much fun. I would definitely go and buy that. Definitely go trade my Scrambler for that. The other bike I would love to see is a sport-oriented model with that single cylinder. I've talked to you guys about this, where an ultra lightweight, Ducati sport bike, a la Twins bike, but has a single cylinder that weighs like 300 pounds. That would be awesome. That would be so cool. Kind of like the old Supermono. That would be amazing. So yeah, I think Ducati's lineup right now with the Monster, it's a little confused, right? It doesn't really know what it wants to be, perhaps. And I think that you need to be a very specific kind of buyer for the Monster, especially the Monster SP. Now, all that being said, is it a monster? Does it feel like a monster? Yes and no. That was the one part of this review that I was kind of like, do I really want to get into this, because it feels kind of mean to the Monster? But I do want to admit to you guys that it doesn't quite feel like a Ducati Monster. It feels like a great naked bike with a V-twin engine, but Ducati's products have changed so much in the last 10 years, like a lot. Like, for example, if you ride a 10-year-old Ducati product versus a new Ducati motorcycle, there's not much in common. You know, the architecture has completely changed. The engines are totally different. The only thing they have in common is that they have an L-twin engine. But, you know, you ride the new V4s, they have nothing in common with the old superbikes. And they've gotten better. Like, this is the best Monster that there's been, probably, because it's approachable, it's lightweight, it's fun, it's easy to ride. But at the same time, I think that it's lost some of that charm, and the fact that I don't have 2 different or 3 different versions of a Monster that I can go and get makes me a little sad, right? But then I flick the wick, and that is nice. Real nice amount of power out of this bad boy. To me, the Monster always felt like, you know, a city bike that had tons of attitude and performance about it, you know. It always felt like a bike that you could ride around on road in a fun way. But I think that this new Ducati Monster, it's super track oriented and it's very sporty. It's so lightweight. I don't know if it really qualifies as that kind of fun, peppy city bike that the old Monsters used to be. Now, one thing that's awesome is it's not nearly as hot as those old Monsters used to be. This feels substantially better in the saddle over one of those old monsters. But what's strange is, despite this engine being relatively, advanced, and it's got the quick shifter up and down, it ultimately does end up feeling a teensy bit agricultural low down in the revs. Like, once you get it up and rolling, which is what you really should be doing with a monster, it feels awesome, and it's got that crisp, like, ultra smooth Ducati twin cylinder feel. But low down, here's the thing, low down, the old air-cooled Ducatis were grumbly and characterful. This just feels kind of bad low down, if I'm being honest. Like, it doesn't feel as peppy and as cool and as interesting, but you get it above about 5,000 or 6,000, as we're doing here, and it's got a lot of attitude, a lot of attitude. As we flick the wick here a little bit, have some fun. There is a lot of performance on tap, no doubt. Watch for tar snakes. Now, one thing I did want to point out, I didn't want to point this out on camera, to be honest, because I felt like it'd be unfair to the monster, but the rear end grip of this bike is strange. So I double checked the tire PSI twice while riding. I bring a little pen gauge with me to make sure that nothing's weird. I honestly thought that I had a flat with this motorcycle, but I don't. Something is happening with this bike mid-corners. You guys see I'm not really adding too much pace here because I want to ride it nice and smooth, because I don't have confidence in the rear end. Basically, when you tip it in, you have good feeling over the bike. But once you pick up the gas, you don't have confidence in the rear of the motorcycle. It feels like you have a flat tire, or the traction control is doing something strange. And I've tried a lot of different settings. I tried road, sport, turning traction control off, and it's still not so nice. It's perhaps suspension setting. It could be because I didn't check the preload on this bike, because it is just a loaner bike. It could be that the preload is really, really aggressive and I'm not getting proper sag on the rear. And I don't know, maybe something's weird with the suspension settings to cause that kind of murky confidence feeling of the rear end. But I did want to report to you guys that despite me checking the tire PSI, despite me going through the modes, there is a bit of a lack of feel from the rear end on this bike. But again, with how tall it is, with how narrow it is, with how flickable it is, it's phenomenally fun side to side. It feels sharp, it feels purposeful, and I can really appreciate that. Gosh, you really do just have a ton of grunt, don't you? Click it up into fifth here. Look, fifth gear, it goes as low as 45 miles an hour. Ooh, it just purrs. But yeah, man, I don't know. I kind of miss the air-cooled, the dry clutch. There was a vibe to those old monsters, man. There's a vibe to old Ducatis. They had a lot of flavor. Had a lot of marinara sauce poured all over them. Okay, everybody. Last but not least, let's take a look at the monster's slow speed prowess. Now, hopefully if you're buying this motorcycle, you are pretty familiar with riding a motorcycle. It's not your first bike. The monster has a pretty generous lock-to-lock. You guys will see here, can carve a pretty tight little circle. And because it's very narrow, it's very easy to ride in this kind of way. You can put your feet down pretty easily if you need to. You kind of just stop like that, and you got quite a bit you can go. See, for example, you can start off just like that, go right the way around, nice and easy. Pitch it full lock left. Goes pretty good, yeah. Again, the lightweight factor of this motorcycle makes it super easy to ride. Ooh, if you pull the clutch in, it'll let you rev. That's awesome. All right. Ducati Monster SP. What do I make of it? Well, I don't know if I would spend my hard-earned doubloons on a monster, truthfully. I think there's better motorcycles in Ducati's lineup that uses this engine. I don't think it's quite as interesting or unique in this platform as it is in, for example, the Desert X, right? Which is, a more adventure-focused version of, a Testa Stretta. But I still think it's a better street bike. The MT-09 SP is right now my absolute current favorite street bike, period. And it does a lot that's better than this. Philosophically, Ducati doesn't have cruise control on this because it's a sport bike, so that's a big miss. It's quite rattly and rumbly down low, which it doesn't have that much refinement. And people attribute that to Ducati's character, but I don't really buy that, to be honest. I think this thing could definitely be a little smoother down low. I don't really know if it warrants such a high price point. The feel from the cockpit is good, but it's not quite as bespoke or exotic or as top end as you would expect from a Ducati, a $17,000 out the door motorcycle. I'd rather spend hard-earned money on a Street Triple or an MT-09 for sure. This would be maybe third or fourth on my list of naked bikes in that category. But happy that it exists, I think if you were going to the Ducati dealership and you wanted something in their 900 range, truthfully, I think the Hypermotard is a better motorcycle than the Monster just because it's a little bit more unique and a little bit more fun to ride. That bike is an absolute riot to ride. This thing just feels like quite a street bike version of a 950 Hypermotard. The Super Sport's a very nice motorcycle too. It has that kind of elegant look and feel to it that I think this bike misses out on. And ultimately, the look of this bike is for a lot of people a deal breaker. It's just a bit, ordinary looking, Japanese looking. So yeah, I think I'd rate this thing like a 7 out of 10, ultimately. I don't think it does anything particularly fantastic or interesting to the point where I'm like, wow, this is like such a great motorcycle. It definitely didn't wow me or blow me away when I rode it around all this morning. But it's a good bike. I think it's a little overpriced for what it is, and I'm sad that Ducati doesn't make more versions of the Monster. But boys, that's going to wrap up my ride and review on the Monster SP here. Big shout out to Eurocycle for the support on today's video. Be sure to check out that link in the description below. They're the reason I have this motorcycle right here in front of me. And thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.
You've made it to the end of another Yami Noob video. Aren't you just a special little cookie? Aren't you just something so great? Aren't you just, look at you, you're just so freaking cute. Why don't you go ahead and click on the next video? Why don't you go ahead, listen, hey, I'm just kidding around. Hey, listen to me. Click on the video.